Today we're talking about skimming. What is skimming?
So skimming is where individuals who are looking to get financial gain is able to capture data from your credit card or your debit card.
And this is not a new crime.
No, skimming's been around for 20 to 25, 30 years. It's just evolved in how the criminals are capturing the information.
How big of a problem is skimming?
So skimming has evolved. I would say in the early 2000s it's pretty prominent at restaurants, and then it gradually moved to retailers with point-of-sale terminals, and then hackers became involved. They were actually going after the card processors and getting millions of credit cards, right? That was very common between 2008 and 2010. But obviously, because of the loss, the credit card processors installed more secure systems to prevent the hacking. And then we went to gas pump skimming, became very common. A lot of this is because in 2015, the market moved to the EMV chip, which is the integrated circuit chip that is in most cards today. As part of that process, the liability moved from the bank to the merchant or the retailer. So if the retailer wasn't using the EMV chip technology, they could be liable for the expense rather than the bank.
And have the chips been effective, though, moving away from the magnetic strip to the chip? Has that helped?
Yeah, the chips have definitely been affected. I mean, I think there's some studies that show that the reduction in fraud, especially between 2017 and 2018 at retailers, dropped almost 80%. So there's a substantial reduction until the criminals learn ways to subvert that security, which they've been able to do.
They have done that?
They have.
And what are some of the ways that they're doing that?
So they've developed, instead of just the basic skimmer, which we still see, they have these things called skimmers, which are actually able to extract the data from the chip. That information can then be used to put on a mag stripe, a basic credit card, which is still usable for online purchases or in most stores. The mag stripe still works. So
essentially the chip isn't a silver bullet, right? It's not going to stop this.
No, it's definitely not going to stop it because of the convenience. If you're a retailer, you don't want to be inconvenienced. You don't want someone there trying to complete a sale and the sale doesn't go through. They're looking to get the funds. So if the chip reader doesn't work, they're going to ask the purchaser to swipe the card.
And that's something that they have now added into the scheme, right? They can introduce malware that makes your chip malfunction so you're forced to swipe?
So what the criminals have done as they've evolved, if they can't pull the data from the chip, they'll actually introduce malware into the point-of-sale terminal so the chip, the tap to pay, or the chip could not be read. So then the retailer will say, please swipe your card. And they're able to capture the data from the swipe.
Why is it easier to capture the data from the swipe on a magnetic strip than, say, tap to pay or using the chip inserted?
Because the magnetic swipe is not encoded, it's not encrypted, it's wide open. So you can use any reader to pull that information, and that's going to give the personal information, the card information, and of course some other details which the criminals are able to use straight from the swipe.
So we have cards that have chips, we have cards that do not have chips. For example, Snap cards do not have chips. Does that make them more vulnerable to theft?
Yes, so one of the things about Snap cards in particular is when they're ran, if I put a skimmer on ATM over the weekend, I will be able to tell the number of Snap cards that were inserted in the ATM based off the number that's assigned to the Snap card. There's a certain sequence of numbers that will let me know what type of card it is. So what the criminals know is these cards get reloaded at a certain time each month. So they will set those numbers aside and they will have a set of people go out to cash those cards out at the exact time those cards are reloaded. And that's how they pull the money from the Snap cards.
It's basically clockwork. They know the timetable for when the window of opportunity is.
Yeah, 100%. So the cards where the swipe data is available, it makes it much easier to make the counterfeit credit card to go cash out. And what they'll do is they will target ATMs in very high traffic areas, and normally they do it over the weekend. And they may find neighborhoods where the Snap cards are very common.
How quickly can these be installed?
Most of the shimmers and skimmers, we're talking seconds, no more than 30 seconds to get the device installed.
And it's virtually unnoticeable.
Yes, you cannot see the latest technology of the shimmers and skimmers that are being used. They're called deep insertion. there's no outward symbol or sign that a skimmer is installed.
So a lot of people say, why should I care about this?
Well, you should care, mainly because you're losing money, your bank's losing money, and that also increases the price of doing business. The transaction fees, other things have to be incurred to pay for those costs.
We talk about loss prevention, but in the case of this kind of crime, it sounds like there's no real way to completely prevent or stop this from happening.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is understanding the risk and finding ways to minimize it.
How organized is this type of criminal enterprise?
It's very organized. They travel together, and there's different people. There's the people who make the shimmers and skimmers. There's the people who insert them. We call them, oftentimes in South Florida, they're called the mechanics. They're the ones who make the devices, and they're the ones who install them. And then we have networks of money mules, who their goal is to go cash out and reap the reward from the stolen information.
And on the high end, how much can these thieves make?
Well, obviously, they can make millions, depending on the organization of the network. But I would say on an average weekend, off a shimmer or skimmer that's been input, the cash out is somewhere between 15 and 30 grand.
What do you think it'll take for someone, either the institutions or policymakers, to try and put more resources towards preventing this?
For the most part, it just depends on the loss. If the cost to prevent the loss is more than the loss, then they're not willing to do it.
Personal question. What do you do at point of service terminals or gas stations or ATMs?
Well, I'm very careful. I check out the surroundings, obviously, but like I said, most of these things aren't detectable. What I would say is, think about the ATM you're using. Like, is it in a high traffic area where there's a lot of people around, or is it like kind of off the beaten path that could easily be accessible to a cyber criminal, right? You make a decision whether you want to use a debit card or a credit card for obvious reasons, and think it through. But there's not a lot that I do different than anybody else. Just understand the risks are out there.